The Old Lion. A lion, worn out with years, and powerless from disease, lay on the ground at the point of death. A boar rushed upon him, and avenged with a stroke of his tusks a long-remembered injury. Shortly afterward, the bull with his horns gored him as if he were an enemy. When the ass saw that the huge beast could be assailed with impunity, he let drive at his forehead with his heels. The expiring lion said, "I have reluctantly brooked the insults of the brave, but to be compelled to endure such treatment from thee, a disgrace to nature, is indeed to die a double death." The Old Hound. A hound, who in the days of his youth and strength, had never yielded to any beast of the forest, encountered in his old age a boar in the chase. He seized him boldly by the ear, but could not retain his hold, because of the decay of his teeth, so that the boar escaped. His master, quickly coming up, was very much disappointed, and fiercely abused the dog. The hound looked up and said, "It was not my fault, master, my spirit was as good as ever, but I could not help my infirmities. I rather deserve to be praised for what I have been, than to be blamed for what I am." The Bee and Jupiter. A bee from Mount Hymettus, the queen of the hive, ascended to Olympus, to present Jupiter some honey, fresh from her combs. Jupiter, delighted with the offering of honey, promised to give whatever she should ask. She, therefore, besought him, saying, "Give me, I pray thee, a sting, that if any mortal shall approach, to take my honey, I may kill him." Jupiter was much displeased, for he loved the race of man, but could not refuse the request, because of his promise. He thus answered the bee, "You shall have your request, but it will be at the peril of your own life. For if you use your sting, it shall remain in the wound you make, and then you will die from the loss of it. Evil wishes, like chickens, come home to roost." The Milkwoman and her pail. A farmer's daughter was carrying her pail of milk from the field to the farmhouse, when she fell a musing. "The money for which this milk will be sold, will buy at least 300 eggs. The eggs, allowing for all mishaps, will produce 250 chickens. The chickens will become ready for the market, when poultry will fetch the highest price, so that by the end of the year, I shall have money enough for my share, to buy a new gown. In this dress, I will go to the Christmas parties, where all the young fellows will propose to me, but I will toss my head, and refuse them every one." At this moment, she tossed her head in unison with her thoughts, when down fell the milk pail to the ground, and all her imaginary schemes perished in a moment. The Seaside Travelers. Some travelers, journeying along the seashore, climbed to the summit of a tall cliff, and looking over the sea, saw in the distance what they thought was a large ship. They waited, in the hope of seeing it enter the harbor, but as the object on which they looked was driven nearer to shore by the wind, they found that it could at the most be a small boat, and not a ship. When, however, it reached the beach, they discovered that it was only a large faggot of sticks, and one of them said to his companions, "We have waited for no purpose, for after all, there is nothing to see but a load of wood." Our mere anticipations of life outrun its realities. The Brazier and His Dog. A brazier had a little dog, which was a great favorite with his master, and his constant companion. While he hammered away at his metals, the dog slept, but when, on the other hand, he went to dinner and began to eat, the dog woke up and wagged his tail, as if he would ask for a share of his meal. His master one day, pretending to be angry, and shaking his stick at him, said, "You wretched little sluggard! What shall I do to you? While I am hammering on the anvil, you sleep on the mat, and when I begin to eat after my toil, you wake up, and wag your tail for food. Do you not know that labor is the source of every blessing, and that none but those who work are entitled to eat?" The Ass and His Shadow. A traveler hired an ass to convey him to a distant place. The day being intensely hot, and the sun shining, in its strength, the traveler stopped to rest, and sought shelter from the heat, under the shadow of the ass. As this afforded only protection for one, and as the traveler and the owner of the ass both claimed it, a violent dispute arose between them, as to which of them had the right to the shadow. The owner maintained that he had let the ass only, and not his shadow. The traveler asserted that he had, with the hire of the ass, hired his shadow also. The quarrel proceeded from words to blows, and while the men fought, the ass galloped off. In quarreling about the shadow, we often lose the substance. The Ass and His Masters. An ass, belonging to an herb seller, who gave him too little food, and too much work, made a petition to Jupiter, to be released from his present service, and provided with another master. Jupiter, after warning him that he would repent his request, caused him to be sold to a tile maker. Shortly afterward, finding that he had heavier loads to carry, and harder work in the brick field, he petitioned for another change of master. Jupiter, telling him that it would be the last time that he could grant his request, ordained that he be sold to a tanner. The ass found that he had fallen into worse hands, and noting his master's occupation, said, groaning, "It would have been better for me to have been either starved by the one, or to have been overworked by the other of my former masters, than to have been bought by my present owner, who will even after I am dead tan my hide, and make me useful to him." The Oak and the Reeds. A very large oak was uprooted by the wind, and thrown across a stream. It fell among some reeds, which is thus addressed: "I wonder how you, who are so light and weak, are not entirely crushed by these strong winds." They replied, "You fight and contend with the wind, and consequently you are destroyed, while we on the contrary, bend before the least breath of air, and therefore remain unbroken, and escape. Stoop to conquer." The Fisherman and the Little Fish. A fisherman, who lived on the produce of his nets, one day, caught a single small fish, as the result of his day's labor. The fish, panting convulsively, thus entreated for his life, "O sir, what good can I be to you, and how little am I worth? I am not yet come to my full size. I pray to spare my life, and put me back into the sea. I shall soon become a large fish, fit for the tables of the rich, and then you can catch me again, and make a handsome profit of me." The fisherman replied, "I should indeed be a very simple fellow if, for the chance of a greater uncertain profit, I were to forego my present certain gain." The Hunter and the Woodman. A hunter, not very bold, was searching for the tracks of a lion. He asked a man felling oaks in the forest if he had seen any marks of his footsteps, or knew where his lair was. "I will," said the man, "at once show you the lion himself." The hunter, turning very pale, and chattering with his teeth from fear, replied, "No, thank you. I did not ask that. It is his track only I am in search of, not the lion himself." The hero is brave in deeds, as well as words. The Wild Boar and the Fox. A wild boar stood under a tree, and rubbed his tusks against the trunk. A fox passing by, asked him why he thus sharpened his teeth, when there was no danger threatening from either huntsman or hound. He replied, "I do it advisedly, for it would never do to have to sharpen my weapons, just at the time I ought to be using them." The Swan and the Goose. A certain rich man bought in the market a goose and a swan. He fed the one for his table, and kept the other for the sake of its song. When the time came for killing the goose, the cook went to get him at night, when it was dark, and he was not able to distinguish one bird from the other. By mistake, he caught the swan, instead of the goose. The swan, threatened with death, burst forth into song, and thus made himself known by his voice, and preserved his life by his melody. The Swollen Fox. A very hungry fox, seeing some bread and meat, left by shepherds in the hollow of an oak, crept into the hole, and made a hearty meal. When he finished, he was so full, that he was not able to get out, and began to groan, and lament his fate. Another fox passing by heard his cries, and coming up, inquired the cause of his complaining. On learning what had happened, he said to him, "Ah, you will have to remain there, my friend, until you become such as you were when you crept in, and then you will easily get out." The Fox and the Woodcutter. A fox, running before the hounds, came across a woodcutter, felling an oak, and begged him to show him a safe hiding place. The woodcutter advised him to take shelter in his own hut, so the fox crept in, and hid himself in a corner. The huntsman soon came up with his hounds, and inquired of the woodcutter if he had seen the fox. He declared that he had not seen him, and yet pointed, all the time he was speaking, to the hut where the fox lay hidden. The huntsman took no notice of the signs, but believing his word, hastened forward in the chase. As soon as they were well away, the fox departed without taking any notice of the woodcutter, whereon he called to him, and reproached him, saying, "You ungrateful fellow, you owe your life to me, and yet you leave me, without a word of thanks." The fox replied, "Indeed, I should have thanked you fervently, if your deeds had been as good as your words, and if your hands had not been traitors to your speech." The Birdcatcher, the Partridge, and the Cock. A birdcatcher was about to sit down to a dinner of herbs, when a friend unexpectedly came in. The bird trap was quite empty, as he had caught nothing, and he had to kill a pied partridge, which he had tamed for a decoy. The bird entreated earnestly for his life. "What would you do without me, when next you spread your nets? Who would chirp you to sleep, or call for you the covey of answering birds?" The birdcatcher spared his life, and determined to pick out a fine young cock, just attaining to his comb. But the cock expostulated in piteous tones, from his perch, "If you kill me, Who will announce to you the appearance of the dawn? Who will wake you to your daily tasks, or tell you when it is time to visit the bird trap in the morning?" He replied, "What you say is true. You are a capital bird at telling the time of day. But my friend and I must have our dinners. Necessity knows no law." The monkey and the fisherman. A monkey, perched upon a lofty tree, saw some fishermen casting their nets into a river, and narrowly watched their proceedings. The fisherman after a while gave up fishing, and on going home to dinner, left their nets upon the bank. The monkey, who is the most imitative of animals, descended from the treetop, and endeavored to do as they had done. Having handled the net, he threw it into the river, but became tangled in the meshes and drowned. With his last breath, he said to himself, "I am rightly served, for what business had I, who had never handled the net, to try and catch fish?" The flea and the wrestler. A flea settled upon the bare foot of a wrestler, and bit him, causing the man to call loudly upon Hercules for help. When the flea a second time hopped upon his foot, he groaned and said, "Oh, Hercules! If you will not help me against a flea, how can I hope for your assistance against greater antagonists?" The two frogs. Two frogs dwelt in the same pool. When the pool dried up, under the summer's heat, they left it and set out together for another home. As they went along, they chanced to pass a deep well, amply supplied with water, and when they saw it, one of the frogs said to the other, "Let us descend and make our abode in this well. It will furnish us with shelter and food." The other replied with greater caution, "But suppose the water should fail us? How can we get out again from so great a depth? Do nothing, without a regard to the consequences." The cat and the mice. A certain house was overrun with mice. A cat, discovering this, made her way into it, and began to catch and eat them one by one. Fearing for their lives, the mice kept themselves close in their holes. The cat was no longer able to get at them, and perceived that she must tempt them forth by some device. For this purpose, she jumped upon a peg, and suspending herself from it, pretended to be dead. One of the mice, peeping stealthily out, saw her and said, "Ah, my good madam, even though you should turn into a meal bag, we will not come near you." The lion, the bear, and the fox. A lion and a bear seized a kid, at the same moment, and fought fiercely for its possession. When they had fearfully lacerated each other, and were faint from the long combat, they lay down exhausted with fatigue. A fox, who had gone round them at a distance several times, saw them both stretched on the ground with the kid lying untouched in the middle. He ran in between them, and seizing the kid scampered off, as fast as he could. The lion and the bear saw him, but not being able to get up, said, "Woe be to us, that we should have fought and belabored ourselves, only to serve the turn of a fox." It sometimes happens that one man has all the toil, and another all the profit. The doe and the lion. A doe, hard pressed by hunters, sought refuge in a cave belonging to a lion. The lion concealed himself on seeing her approach, but when she was safe within the cave, sprang upon her and tore her to pieces. "Woe is me!" exclaimed the doe, "who have escaped from man, only to throw myself into the mouth of a wild beast. In avoiding one evil, care must be taken, not to fall into another. The Farmer and the Fox. A farmer, who bore a grudge against a fox, for robbing his poultry yard, caught him at last, and being determined to take an ample revenge, tied some rope well soaked in oil to his tail, and set it on fire. The fox, by a strange fatality, rushed to the fields of the farmer, who had captured him. It was the time of the wheat harvest, but the farmer reaped nothing that year, and returned home grieving sorely. The Seagull and the Kite. A seagull, having bolted down too large a fish, burst its deep-gullet bag, and lay down on the shore to die. A kite saw him and exclaimed, "You richly deserve your fate, for a bird of the air has no business to seek its food from the sea. Every man should be content to mind his own business." The Philosopher, the Ants, and Mercury. A philosopher witnessed from the shore the shipwreck of a vessel, of which the crew and passengers were all drowned. He inveighed against the injustice of Providence, which would, for the sake of one criminal, perchance sailing in the ship, allow so many innocent persons to perish. As he was indulging in these reflections, he found himself surrounded by a whole army of ants, near whose nest he was standing. One of them climbed up and stung him, and he immediately trampled them all to death with his foot. Mercury presented himself, and striking the philosopher with his wand, said, "And are you indeed to make yourself a judge of the dealings of Providence, who hast thyself in a similar manner treated these poor ants?" The Mouse and the Bull. A bull was bitten by a mouse and, angered by the wound, tried to capture him. But the mouse reached his hole in safety. Though the bull dug into the walls with his horns, he tired before he could rout out the mouse, and crouching down, went to sleep outside the hole. The mouse peeped out, crept furtively up his flank, and again biting him, retreated to his hole. The bull, rising up, and not knowing what to do, was sadly perplexed. At which the mouse said, "The great do not always prevail. There are times when the small and lowly are the strongest to do mischief." The Lion and the Hare. A lion came across a hare, who was fast asleep. He was just in the act of seizing her, when a fine young hart trotted by, and he left the hare to follow him. The hare, scared by the noise, awoke and scudded away. The lion was unable, after a long chase, to catch the hart, and returned to feed upon the hare. On finding that the hare also had run off, he said, "I am rightly served, for having let go of the food that I had in my hand, for the chance of obtaining more." The Peasant and the Eagle. A peasant found an eagle, captured in a trap, and much admiring the bird, set him free. The eagle did not prove ungrateful to his deliverer, for seeing the peasant sitting under a wall, which was not safe, he flew toward him, and with his talons snatched a bundle from his head. When the peasant rose in pursuit, the eagle let the bundle fall again. Taking it up, the man returned to the same place, to find that the wall under which he had been sitting had fallen to pieces, and he marveled at the service rendered him by the eagle. The image of Mercury and the carpenter. A very poor man, a carpenter by trade, had a wooden image of Mercury, before which he made offerings day by day, and begged the idol to make him rich, but in spite of his entreaties, he became poorer and poorer. At last, being very angry, he took his image down from its pedestal, and dashed it against the wall. When its head was knocked off, out came a stream of gold, which the carpenter quickly picked up and said, "Well, I think thou art altogether contradictory and unreasonable, for when I paid you honor, I reaped no benefits, but now that I maltreat you, I am loaded with an abundance of riches." The Bull and the Goat. A bull, escaping from a lion, hid in a cave, which some shepherds had recently occupied. As soon as he entered, a he-goat left in the cave, sharply attacked him with his horns. The bull quietly addressed him, "Bite away as much as you will. I have no fear of you, but of the lion. Let that monster go away, and I will soon let you know what is the respective strength of a goat and a bull." It shows an evil disposition to take advantage of a friend in distress. The Dancing Monkeys. A prince had some monkeys, trained to dance. Being naturally great mimics of men's actions, they showed themselves most apt pupils, and when arrayed in their rich clothes and masks, they danced as well as any of the courtiers. The spectacle was often repeated, with great applause, till on one occasion a courtier, bent on mischief, took from his pocket a handful of nuts, and threw them upon the stage. The monkeys at the sight of the nuts, forgot their dancing, and became, as indeed they were, monkeys, instead of actors. Pulling off their masks, and tearing their robes, they fought with one another for the nuts. The dancing spectacle thus came to an end, amidst the laughter and ridicule of the audience. The Fox and the Leopard. The fox and the leopard disputed which was the more beautiful of the two. The leopard exhibited one by one of the various spots which decorated his skin. But the fox, interrupting him, said, "And how much more beautiful than you am I, who am decorated, not in body, but in mind." The Monkeys and their Mother. The monkey, it is said, has two young ones at each birth. The mother fondles one, and nurtures it, with the greatest affection and care, but hates and neglects the other. It happened once, that the young one which was caressed and loved, was smothered by the too great affection of the mother, while the despised one was nurtured and reared, in spite of the neglect to which it was exposed. The best intentions will not always ensure success. The Oaks and Jupiter. The oaks presented a complaint to Jupiter, saying, "We bear for no purpose the burden of life, as of all the trees that grow, we are the most continually in peril of the axe." Jupiter made answer, "You have only to thank yourselves for the misfortunes to which you are exposed, for if you did not make such excellent pillars and posts, and prove yourselves so serviceable to the carpenters and the farmers, the axe would not so frequently be laid to your roots." The Hare and the Hound. A hound started a hare from his lair, but after a long run, gave up the chase. A goatherd, seeing him stop, mocked him, saying, "The little one is the best runner of the two." The hound replied, "You do not see the difference between us. I was only running for a dinner, but he for his life. The Traveler in Fortune. A traveler, wearied from a long journey, lay down, overcome with fatigue, on the very brink of a deep well. Just as he was about to fall into the water, Dame Fortune, it is said, appeared to him, and waking him from his slumber, thus addressed him, "Good sir, pray to wake up, for if you fall into the well, the blame will be thrown on me, and I shall get an ill name among mortals. For I find that men are sure to impute their calamities to me. However, much by their own folly, they have really brought them on themselves. Everyone is more or less master of his own fate." The Bald Knight. A bald knight, who wore a wig, went out to hunt. A sudden puff of wind blew off his hat and wig, at which a loud laugh rang forth from his companions. He pulled up his horse, and with great glee, joined in the joke by saying, "What a marvel it is, that hares which are not mine, should fly from me, when they have forsaken even the man on whose head they grew." The Shepherd and the Dog. A shepherd penning his sheep, in the fold for the night, was about to shut up a wolf with him, when his dog, perceiving the wolf, said, "Master, how can you expect the sheep to be safe, if you admit a wolf into the fold?" The Lamp. A lamp, soaked with too much oil, and flaring brightly, boasted that it gave more light than the sun. Then a sudden puff of wind arose, and the lamp was immediately extinguished. Its owner lit it again, and said, "Boast no more, but henceforth, be content to give thy light in silence. Know that not even the stars need to be relit."